Like many of its neighboring islands, St. Vincent and the Grenadines was created by explosive volcanic activity. The recent activity at the La Soufrière volcano is a reminder of the island's prehistoric past. It also warrants reflection on the peoples who have called the island home over the centuries. Living this close to nature is probably the reason for the resilience of our Vincentian nation. Since the times of our first peoples, we have always found our way by making use of the bounty that Hairuna provides for us. Long before the cruise ships began to dock in Kingston, and before the slave ships forced the migration of thousands of people, the island was home to various tribes: the Saladoid, Tromasoid, Swazoid, and the warlike Kalinago.
For water, have the a cabin representing the canoe, have the drum that people still use today, and this is a replica of a hut that people used to live in now.
Remember those whips and colonization, those lashes and stigmatization of our ancestors in this nation.
Wakia baba, turai toka, wami keni, wami karaja wei, wanku, wakia, tainoti, umatung, busika, wakia, rajukubia, ahekasabi, urakangai, magojaja, yukijuhang, diosa.
An ancient people moved up the chains of islands from South America, arriving in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as early as 160 AD. More settlers arrived over the years, including Africans, who had crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus. Over time, the island became home to a mixed-race population, the Garifuna. These indigenous people were skilled weavers, stone workers, and canoe builders. They farmed and processed cassava and other produce, lived in strong houses that survived hurricanes, and were made of materials they found right here in the forest. The Caribbean Sea was like a superhighway, and its indigenous peoples maintained links with other groups through trade and migration. And they have been credited for creating the petroglyphs that can be found across the island. Huge volcanic rocks with mysterious faces carved into them. They are a lasting reminder of the peoples who lived on this island before the Europeans arrived. But most Vincentians today are unaware of their historical past and the meaning or significance of these ancient relics. In the other islands, such as Cuba and the Bahamas, the indigenous Tainos were completely wiped out through diseases brought by the first Europeans.
We were told that the islands of the Caribbean, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, were discovered by one Christopher Columbus from Spain. But we no longer teach that perspective. We prefer to say that he was probably the first European to set foot on the islands of the Caribbean, because we don't believe that a person can discover a country where people have already inhabited.
The island was one of the last places to be colonized by the Europeans during the 17th to 18th century, and there was a native population, of these people. They were called Kalinago, descendants of the people who came up from the Orinoco Valley, and they defended the island, viciously.
It was 1795. That's the last one they win, And how would they do to win that is because that they sent for the troops from Central America. If not, this capital here won't a name, Kingston.
It took them many, many years before they were able to defeat the Caribs. That is how much we resisted the penetration of the white man.
Our island remained untouched by Europeans because of the Kalinago-Garifuna resistance. They forced Europeans to acknowledge their presence by demanding treaties that granted the Kalinago-Garifuna people control of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As the colonists were becoming more desperate for land and wealth, the island became very attractive to enslaved Africans searching for freedom in the New World. Some were survivors of shipwrecks, and others had escaped from other islands. They were welcomed into the indigenous mix, and their children continued the resistance against the colonists. The Europeans refer to the Garifuna as the Black Caribs, and they are the ancestors from which many modern Vincentians are descended.
The British call them the Black Caribs, right? And they use this blackness to discredit these people, the right to their home, to the island, so they could take it away from them. They said, well, if they're black, they must be escaped slaves, which means they have no right to be there. So they use that to justify a genocide. The Garifuna represent a mixture of Amerindians from South America who traveled north from the Orinoco Valley with Africans, some say from West Africa, some say more specifically Mali.
Colonialism tried to hide the truth about our people. And St. Vincent, we have a unique situation here because of our history with the new breed, this new people, the Garifuna Kalinago people.
Chatouet was the chief of all the chiefs. Anybody who wanted to negotiate, if the French came here in those days, they had to negotiate with Chatouet.
He was not just a chief, he was a chief of chiefs, and he was a warrior chief. And if you were really to think back, how ready any leaders willing to stand up and fight a battle? Because in his time you had to fight with sword and gun and cutlass. It was who had the skill. And it is said because he never fought a man with a sword, why he was taken by the sword. If you were to go back to those days, you're looking out and you're seeing these ships coming with their guns. You don't have guns. Maybe the French may have given them some guns, but you have to get the ammunition to continue the war. It was a war that was going on for 12 years because he didn't know any other king. He was the king.
Chatouet is a French adjective which means to shimmer, in very much the same way that the eye of a cat shimmers and seems to change color when light hits it. As a matter of fact, the name Chatouet is rooted in the word chat, which is French for cat. Check it. So it is possible that the name Chatouet was actually a reference to his personality, his characteristics as a warrior, and not necessarily his last name.
No one really knows right now to say definitively how Chatouet died. But I think most historians point to the fact that he was ambushed, right? He was ambushed and shot, I think somewhere up in Dashes. But the Garifuna warriors and them just ran with him. So they didn't really actually know what happened.
Some of us in Greeks suspect that Chatouet's body is buried somewhere in the highlands of Greece. Reason being, they would have chosen, when he died, they would have chosen the most secure community or the most secure setting to conceal his body. Otherwise, it would have been a trophy for the British.
Baliso was the island that many of our brothers and sisters, the Kalinagos, the Garifuna people, were sent on when they were exiled from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because many of them died on that island because it doesn't have a lot of, there's no food, there's no water. And many hundreds of them died there. The Garifuna people from the diaspora, when they visit our shows, they want to see where their ancestors actually journeyed from. So basically, the journey was really from Baliso to Rotan and then to those countries in South America where many of our Garifuna brothers and sisters are today.
What do you do with people you conquer? You send them into exile, or you execute them, or you enslave them, make them convert to your way of living. And so taking them to Baliso, could imagine loading up people at Byra and taking them across that sea, taking them to Baliso. Are you sure that that's all that ever happened?
I'm learning about the history of this island, this rocky piece of land that is somewhere in the middle of the city of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and actually going there to see for themselves where their ancestors were abandoned. It is something that they look forward to seeing. I think it helped to calm their spirit and really to get a force and view of the difficulties that their ancestors would have faced prior to going to those countries.
The bones of the family buried upon you. Forget, you know, respect for sure. Make Cali so memento to the Garifuna people.
My first encounter with a good group of people from that represented our ancestors that came, and they had such a holiness of approach to the place because it had seen terrible things had happened on Baliso, and they felt the presence of something crying out, an echo for recognition and understanding of what took place on Baliso. And those that survived and went to Rotan, that not even a lizard is supposed to survive there, and they have survived, and they are a people declared in this century, 2001, by UNESCO as having a peculiar and special type of heritage. And that took years before that by their advocacy to the United Nations, to UNESCO, for UNESCO to examine the history of these people, a people of exile, and to understand that even the language is a unique language.
We did not have bridges to connect us to St. Vincent, so you had to cross the rivers to come into the community back in a couple hundred years ago, until around 1959, 1960, when Joshua built the two bridges, and that connected us properly to St. Vincent.
Carib, you stupid, you soft-headed, you live behind God's back, okay? And we were called all kind of names, okay? We wasn't recognized for who we really was. And, you know, as compared to today, I will say to my colleagues, everybody today wants to be Garifuna. But days gone by, they didn't treat us fairly as descendants of Garifuna.
We still cannot speak proper English. We still have to attend school to learn how to learn the white man's language or the white man's English, because it was never our language.
I kind of shame because I can't talk my Garifuna language. I could talk the Englishman language, I mean I can't talk it very good, but I can't talk a couple of words in Garifuna. Now why? Why shouldn't I be able to talk Garifuna language? You see, if I'm able to talk Garifuna language, and if I'm able to understand Garifuna people, I go understand that why doing here as a country ain't the right thing.
So for me, it was somewhat a torture. It was somewhat unfair to have to forget about your own communication, your own forms and means of communication, and to have forced this this language on you that was alien to you.
Africans were used on the small farms of the French planters, but it was not until the development of the sugar industry that slavery expanded. In comparison to many other Caribbean islands, slavery lasted for a relatively short period of time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Forward-thinking Europeans were already beginning to raise serious issues that challenged Caribbean slavery. Despite its relatively short duration, slavery was a cruel, inhumane, and intense experience for the oppressed. The laws were severe. Slaves were not allowed to leave the estates without a ticket except when they were going to market. Their houses were often searched for weapons, and slaves were forbidden from preaching. Despite the restrictions prescribed in the laws, the slaves tried to fashion a life of their own and create their spaces to do so by adopting the ways of the land.
From sun up to sundown to make profit for the colonizers. That is why the Caribbean countries get so rich, because of the backs of the indigenous people and the Africans.
When they bring you, they own you, and you work and you never get paid. When you talk about reparations, you're only talking about reparations for the Garifuna people. Talk about reparations from St. Vincent and Grenadines. We have reparations to talk about on both fronts. And that's one from African slavery, plus from the Kalinago and Garifuna.
They had African folks from different parts of Africa that came to this land. And the indigenous people was here, so they get used to. And by that time they had the mixed down, which is the Garifuna people. So these people were here with the Africans that they bring to put on the plantation for the development of the industry, for the sugar, cotton, tobacco. Lots of knowledge from the Africans was applied for the development of the industries. So they brought that. They also brought the art, the dance, the songs, the religion. So in the Caribbean we benefit, we still have remains of that in our culture. For instance, in St. Vincent and Grenadines, we still have the Baptist religion. In my opinion, the Baptist religion comes in the heart of black people, unlike the other religions.
My job is from the African section, This is more a djembe style, but the guy wanna make a drum a different style. Even though the African style and the Garifuna style is a kind of similar, but the designs and the sound and stuff like that is kind of different. Because the Garifuna just build like about two major drums, right? A premier and a second. This is a first and a second basically, right? A bassy rhythm and a high pitch rhythm, right? So, but the African will be more building like a djembe, right? And I think the basic principle may be the same, right? That the drum is a sacred instrument, because the drum not only a musical instrument. Nowadays we just see the drum as music, but those days was a communication.
I use what was left by my generation, plus I use the elements of history, culture, tradition, heritage, and environment to develop my artistic ability. My surrounding, my environment is what I use to help me to develop my banana leaf products that I develop to make pictures that reflect my history.
The indigenous peoples, the Caribs, the Garifuna, both home and abroad, and we have also included the Garifuna diaspora that may not necessarily be Vincentian, but who recognize and identify with the Garifuna of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who recognize St. Vincent and the Grenadines as their homeland, and therefore they see as part of their responsibility to assist in the development of this culture. In the North Windward area, we have a lot of the indigenous practices being maintained in that area. And we have, for example, the National Heroes Festival, which takes place in March of each year. And what we have done is to encourage, to work along, supported financially and technically the group in that area. We have done the same with the group in the North Leeward area and the group in the Greggs area. Those are the three areas which I think we have the strongest remaining indigenous culture of St. Vincent and the Grenadines still residing. And we have provided monetary and technical support for the groups in those areas to continue to promote the festival. We have actually extended the celebration to a whole month. So we have National Heroes and Heritage Month.
Craft production is an aspect of our culture that manifests interactions between people, their environment, and their communities.
I did a lot of sketches relating to the artifacts. He would find a piece of work and then he would explain to me. And based on his explanation and the organization and the work that I have, I would try to develop that into a whole piece of pottery. They try to give us the impression that our people are ignorant, didn't have any culture, didn't have everything. But there are some very interesting pieces there, some very elaborate pieces also, in terms of bowls and pots and general artifacts, because you know, these times people didn't have anything they wanted they had to do for themselves. They had to organize their pots and pans and spoons and knives and cutlasses, everything. You know, you can run in the store them time and buy anything.
My mom will make me stay home half day from school because she uses to make the copia basket. So that was her living of making the basket so that we can get to go to school. So I will have to stay home every Friday, and there was the estate at Orange Chair. I will take the basket down to Orange Chair, got them sold, and so that we can have our life living. And I learn a bit from her. Some people sell it copio, some people say pandanas, they call it screw pine, but our own indigenous people was saying penguin. I believe it way back from the Caribs, they were growing. So we still have it. So this is how it look like, but this is the dry one. This is the dry one. When we go to the field to get our materials, we look for the dry ones. And this is one whole straw, which this is the middle of it, and this is the two end, and the two end have cashew. We say kashi around it. So we take out the two end kashi, and we take out the middle kashi, and then we get the two leaves. And to prepare the material after this, we got a piece of wet cloth and wipe it, but then we roll it on our finger. So to get it smooth out. And after we do this now, we use a knife and we smooth it out. And after we smooth it out, we get them to the shapes that we wanted to use. During the arrowroot time, use them to measure. You say measure the arrowroot. So if you dig a line of arrowroot, you measure into baskets to see how much basket you dig per day. Yes. So the bamboo basket used to carry to the river to catch the crayfish.
The ideas, customs, skills, and art of a people or group are communicated and passed along to succeeding generations. Here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our cultural heritage is a synthesis of African, Kalinago, East Indian, Portuguese, and other European influences over the centuries. But what exactly does it mean to be Vincentian? Our cultural resource is perhaps the most underutilized by our people.
Craft production plays a pivotal role in preserving our local history, culture, and tradition. The handicraft industry is a conduit for social and economic growth.
Learned to do handicraft while I was a child growing up. My mother taught me how to do the copy basket. This one is from the vetiver grass. Here we call it the razor grass. This is where you use the straw and the coconut pointer, and you wrap the straw around the coconut pointer. You have to go into the mountain, pull it off the tree, strip off the skin, clean it, strip it into small pieces, and then you weave. But you have to wet it so that it could keep soft. Calabash is something that they used to be using in those days, especially for eating. These are what they used to use for eating, and the clay pots that they make as well. But now we use them and we design them in beautiful designs and do other things with them. One of the petroglyphs from back in the days of the Kalinago people.
The indigenous culture of St. Vincent is alive and could be flourishing if, I think, the artists and craftsmen and so on, if they had the opportunity for getting more exposition as this one. So we are trying our best, we are doing our part in trying to expose them and bring the public to them. And I hope it works out well for all of them.
Many aspects of our culture are dying, or some may say shifting, as the younger generations embrace the North American lifestyle, which seems to have a much greater attraction for them than our local traditions. St. Vincent has an indigenous tradition of craft, inspired by the wealth of artifacts, stories, cultural practices handed down by our ancestors.
The older folks, not too much into it. So we see it fit to start with teach the children, okay? So that as they grow up, they will get interested, and then once they know it, they will be able to pass it on later on.
Maniga não yalandine. Anyagida mutu anabo. Maniga Ghana, we are landing.